right. Well, welcome everyone to Introduction to Ionized Water webinar series. Tonight we're going to have another interesting um, webinar, and tonight we'll basically our main topic tonight we're going to be talking about water quality. And I know we're signing on just a couple of minutes early, but in order to get Heather's much needed help, since I am kind of technically only partially apt, not totally inept, but only partially apt. I appreciate her hopping on. She has a party and she's making time for us anyway. So I hope everybody had a chance to look at the video again from last week. Make sure you've got all your questions written down so that when we get to the Q&A section, if you've got some questions from last week, that'd be fantastic. I don't know if you can see in the reflection of the windows behind me, but I look like I'm living in a house that belongs to a hoarder. I'm collecting some donations for a woman and her children who were just able to get housing after being homeless for a bit. And there's been an overwhelming response. I think I have enough for actually 3 homeless families, honestly. So if you see the reflection and it looks like I'm walking through little piles or giant piles, I actually am until Wednesday or Thursday. But it's worth it. Okay, so we'll get, now that it's right at the top of the hour, we'll go ahead and get truly started. And so once again, I want to welcome you to the Introduction to Ionized Water. Part 3 is all about water quality and how that water quality affects your cells. You know, we are truly in the midst of a water crisis in the country, in the world, but also in our country. And we have an amazing and viable solution to change that crisis. If you don't mind putting yourself on mute as you come in, and then if you have a question, you can unmute yourself. That'd be fantastic. See if I can, because Heather's in charge, I can't mute you. So I'll have to ask you to do it for yourself. So in November of 2005, which was about the same time that I bought my first water ionizer, I bought mine in January of 2005. And in November, a study was published in the American Journal of Nursing that exposed the horrific quality issues of water all across the United States. They reported that annually, this was in 2005, and it has actually gotten worse, but I don't have the most recent statistics. They reported that there were 900 deaths and 900,000 illnesses annually that were attributed to tainted water. Just take a second and take that in. 900 deaths every year. 900,000 illnesses every year in the United States. This isn't all around the world. This is in the United States. In 2009, that number had increased to 19 million illnesses annually, and the numbers keep rising every year. 19 million. It went from 900,000 to 19 million between 2005 and 2009 in only 4 years. It's 10 years later. Can you imagine what the numbers are now? I haven't been able to find a number that was any more recent than 2009. But it is really scary. And when you look at the water crises that we're having in Flint, Michigan, and in other cities all around the US, the pipelines that are exploding and getting into our water sources, this is a very scary situation. So it's not just Flint. Out of 750 schools tested, more than 400 of them, that's more than half of them, had unsafe limits of lead and other contaminants in the water in the drinking fountains. This is for our children. Children are much more susceptible to the contaminants in water than most adults, unless elderly or chronically ill adults would have about the same issues with these contaminants as children. Think about that. Out of 750 schools, and think about how many schools there are across the US, and more than half of them have unsafe limits of lead and other contaminants in the water that goes in through the drinking fountains. This is just not right. 10,000 US communities have poisoned tap water. In fact, your tap water is really just a soup of enteric viruses and bacteria. The word enteric means from your intestinal tract. The reason that you have an enteric soup going on in your water is that your drinking water is, in most cities, recycled sewer water. There will be fresh water added, but they take the sewer water and they filter it and they clean it and they add fresh water back in, and then it goes into the pipes and into your faucet. Yummy, right? There are all in your tap water, you will also find chemical byproducts from manufacturing and lots of pharmaceutical drugs and hormones and heavy metals from degrading plumbing. Now, I want to explain to you that there was a study done and they took urine samples from people all across the US and tested it for different kinds of pharmaceutical drugs. And people who had never taken an antidepressant or a chemotherapy drug or they had them in their urine anyway, because it's in the drinking water. What do they tell you to do when you're finished with the prescription? Flush it down the toilet. What do you think they do in hospitals with, all the bags and bags of drugs that are expired or that are only partially used? The rest of it goes down the drain. And it's getting into our common tap water. You will also, in your drinking water, find runoff from farming, which includes synthetic fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides and animal waste and lots of parasites. Making you thirsty, am I? You'll also find household cleaning residues and arsenic and radon and chemicals from degrading plastics and so much, much, much more. It just gets depressing. The EPA has set allowable limits for 90 chemical contaminants, but thousands more go unregulated and untested because we develop about 12,000 new chemical compounds every year. Even the chemicals that are used to clean and disinfect your water react with the vegetation and produce that are the vegetation that's around the holding tanks and produce byproducts that have been linked to bladder and rectal cancer. And we haven't even touched on fluoride. Fluorides that you find in water are not pharmaceutical quality. They're byproducts of aluminum and fertilizer manufacturing. They contain high concentrations of toxins and heavy metals like lead and arsenic and chromium. And the anti-cavity supplements that you find, in dental practices, which end up in the water because people are swishing it and then spitting it out and down the drain. They were never even found to be safe or effective by the FDA. In fact, they haven't even been tested. And in 1951, an American Dental Association brochure stated that there's no proof that any commercial preparations of fluoride are effective in preventing dental decay. Unfortunately, they're being offered to the public without any adequate scientific evidence of their value. And this was in 1951. And if you're wondering how in the world fluoride supplements got to be a part of our daily routine and in our water, it's because they were grandfathered in before a 1938 law that required drug testing. And so once it's grandfathered in, they know it doesn't have to be vetted any further. But in 1938, it wasn't put in any kind of preparations to stop cavities, and not for any medical reason. It was sold as rat poison. But once that drug is on the market for any reason, doctors can use them to treat any disease or condition. And because there was a big payout to municipalities to get rid of a toxic chemical called fluoride, they convinced people that it was okay to put it in your water because it would stop cavities. And there is absolutely no evidence that that's true. There is plenty of evidence that it is terrible for you and that it collects in your bones and your teeth and creates lower IQ, just like things like lead. It is not a good thing to have. And it's very difficult to get out of your water. Fortunately, here in Spokane, we do not have fluoridated water, although most of the country does. Now, how does this all connect to oxidation and our cells and how we go about living our lives? Since our bodies are somewhere, depending on the tissue, like an overall aggregate number would be that our bodies are 65 to 70% water, or at least they're supposed to be. Each glass of toxic water that you drink adds to the aging process because every single chemical adds more free radicals to our already overburdened bodies. Do you remember what we talked about last week, that we have about 100 trillion cells, and the thing they have in common is that one of the things they have in common is that each one of those 100 trillion cells is bombarded by 10,000 free radicals every day. So every glass of toxic water adds to that whole process of oxidation and aging. Oh, here we go. Here's the cell. I got a little ahead of myself. So remember, our bodies contain about 100 trillion cells, and all the cells have a membrane. And remember, a really healthy cell membrane is supposed to let oxygen freely come in as needed, let water come in as needed, let carbon dioxide and a few other waste products exit as needed, because that is remember, it's called a phospholipid bilayer, which just means it's 2 layers of fat with phosphorus embedded in it. And the outer layer is what's on the outside of the cell, and the inner layer is on the inside of the cell. And those cells are bombarded by 10,000 free radicals every day. And as that happens, both from inside the cell and outside the cell membrane begins to change. And that nice semi-permeable fat layer becomes thick and sticky like the fat on your vent fan. And when that happens, it begins to repel oxygen and water, and it begins to trap acid waste like carbon dioxide. That is called oxidation. And that oxidation leads to dehydration, which leads to inflammation. And you say, well, what about the filter in the Enagic machine? Doesn't that take care of it? Well, most ionizers, including Enagic, use a simple carbon filter that's comparable to a larger size brittle water filter. They're just carbon, and they remove chlorine and some particles very effectively. But here's what you actually need a filter to remove. You need it to remove the chlorine, heavy metals, fluoride, industrial waste, farming and organic waste, bacteria and viruses, chemical residues, and medical waste. And the impregnated silver in your Ionized filter does help with some bacteria and viruses, but it does not handle the rest of these things. So as you ionize water, it doesn't automatically take these things out. Sometimes it just ionizes these compounds and breaks them into several different compounds that can be even more dangerous than the original. So what I want you to understand, and what I want you to help other people understand, is that the quality of the water you drink determines the quality of those 100 trillion cells in your body. Now, where did that come from? Somehow we got a little glitch there. I went backwards instead of forward. So you remember this chart from the last couple of weeks where we looked at the body and all of these different kinds of disease processes and illnesses. And what we were able to determine is that if you were to take any one of those disease processes or illnesses and put it in your Google search box and say Alzheimer's and oxidation, or renal nephritis and oxidation, or elevated cholesterol and oxidation, or chronic inflammation and oxidation, or rheumatoid arthritis or diabetes or cancer or dermatitis, and you always add that word and oxidation, you will find that that is the common thread with every one of these illnesses. Every single one of these disease processes, every single one of these illnesses has a common thread of oxidation. That oxidation led to the dehydration of the cell, which led to the inflammatory response that's created, and the cycle goes on and on and on. So that's why we need ionized water. We need ionized water because it creates antioxidants. Remember, we've looked at this a couple of times. But like I said, repetition is how we get these things embedded in our brain, so that when you start to talk to somebody, it just flows out like you have known it from your core. Okay, so here we have this water molecule that is HOH or H2O, and here we've got a couple of ions that were created when the hydrogen split away, when one of the hydrogens split away from the water molecule. We got hydroxide ion, a positive OH negative, and a hydrogen ion, which is a H positive, right? And how that happens in nature all the time. So when water's flowing rapidly down in a stream or falling over a waterfall, this process happens all the time. So it's nothing new. This is not rocket science. It's part of what happens in nature. It's one of the reasons that when you go to a waterfall and you stand close to it, except on a day like today in Washington where it's frigid, if you were to stand in the summer next to a waterfall, you feel so refreshed. Or if you're on the beach and near the ocean, you feel so refreshed as the waves come crashing in, because the air is filled with negatively charged ions. And that gives us an energy boost. It makes us feel better. And so we know from just nature that this is a positive thing. So when it comes to the electrolysis of water, when it comes to making this on a regular basis, we can use electrolysis to create this same kind of split over and over and over again. That just means that water and electricity come together, and they produces some OH negative, some H positive, as well as oxygen and hydrogen gas. So depending on where the electricity is flowing through the water will depend on how many hydroxyl ions and positively charged hydrogen ions and how much oxygen and how much hydrogen gas we get. Now, remember that the ions are responsible for the change in the pH of your water. So the higher the concentration of hydroxide ions or OH negative, the more alkaline the water is. And the higher the concentration of positively charged hydrogen ions, the more acidic it is. Okay? Now, H2, hydrogen gas, is responsible for the antioxidants that are produced in ionized water. H2 works as an amazing antioxidant that stops some of the very worst free radicals in our bodies. But in doing that, it does give up its electron, and we're left with a small and not very vehement or not very active oxidizer. But in exchange for that, it quenched some super bad free radicals. But inside your ionizer, if it's nice and clean, you're going to have another little extra amazing boost in that as the hydrogen gas comes in contact with platinum plates, it freely gives up its electrons. Remember, I told you this is the same basic thing that happens when in a hydroelectric plant. When we're making electricity, the water goes through this same kind of process, and the electricity, the free electrons are put down a wire and result in electricity. And in ionized water, they're put into the alkaline drinking water. And that gives us this glass that's got lots of free electrons. It's going to have hydrogen gas, it's going to have oxygen, it's going to have water, H2O in it. And that's what all really we want it to have, plus a few minerals. Unfortunately, it can have more, which leads us right back to the subject of water quality, that more. Some minerals in your water act like conductors. So electrolytes are minerals that conduct electricity through fluids. So you know in your machine, you have a tank where you put the electrolysis solution, that's electrolytes. In your solution, it's mostly salt and water. So I want you to think about this. Electrolytes are minerals that conduct electricity through water. They include magnesium, potassium, sodium, and small amounts of calcium. Okay, that's what those are all considered electrolytes. And the only place that calcium actually conducts minerals is in our blood, but it doesn't actually do it in water. Some other minerals also act as conductors, like phosphates and sulfides and chloride. They all act as conductors. And so, you know, what a conductor would do is it's something that's going to help electricity get through the fluid. Some other chemicals act like insulators. Some pharmaceutical drugs, some of our cleaning products, some, you know, pretty nasty chemicals are going to act like insulators. So an insulator would stop the flow of electricity through the water, right? So a conductor will conduct it, and an insulator will stop it. But here's the #1 insulator for your water ionizer, and that is calcium. Ionized calcium is one of the stickiest things, and you know that because you've seen it on the inside of your tea kettle, your coffee pot, and your water bottles. Calcium is the #1 enemy of a water ionizer. And that's because ionized calcium, all calcium is sticky. That's why we get lime buildup and things in hard water areas. But once you ionize it, it's sticks to everything, including inside of our bodies. So if you've got calcium building up on the inside of your water bottles, this is what your plates are looking like, because it's so much calcium is collected on the plates that it doesn't have a good place to stick anymore. So a lot of it's being discharged into your drinking water, and then it's collecting on the inside of your bottles or your coffee pot or whatever. And this does two things to your water and your machine. When this all gets gummed up on your plates, on those platinum plates, then electricity can't flow through it anymore. So you're not getting a good split of H2 of water into hydroxide ions and hydrogen ions, and you're not getting much, so you don't have much hydrogen gas, and the hydrogen gas can't come in contact with the platinum plates anymore, so you're not getting free electrons. So it dramatically decreases. The more calcium there is on your plates, the more dramatic decrease there will be in antioxidants in your water. Does that make sense to everybody? So calcium is the enemy of an ionizer. And elemental calcium like this is also an enemy to human bodies, because our bodies we don't eat bones as humans, because we can't utilize it. That calcium is not, calcium carbonate, which is this kind of calcium, is not easily assimilated by human beings. Animals can do it. They have a different digestive system, but humans cannot. And so it literally turns our bodies to stone. It's responsible for a lot of things, from cataracts to hardening of the arteries to arthritis and lots of other kidney issues. So it's very important for us to always address that issue of calcium in the water. Some people are lucky enough to live in an area that has low calcium. I live in an area that has a lot of calcium in the water. So that's equal to hard water. So people either have soft water or hard water, or somewhere in between. I'm on the hard water side. So remember, water plus electricity equals ions, atoms, and molecules, but that's only going to happen when electricity can pass through the water. If we have insulators, we're going to stop the flow or reduce the flow of electricity into the water. So it's not just calcium, that's going to be a lot of other chemicals. And so we'll have a harder time making very strong alkaline water and very strong acid water. And we're going to make very few antioxidants, and we're not going to get any, or maybe only a minute amount of free electrons. So our glass of water is not going to look like this, which is exactly what we want it to look like. So it really is important to do some research about the water in your area and find out what's in your water. And your water report that the city's obligated to give you every year will have a lot to say about what's in your water, but it's only going to test the things that the EPA says are important for them to test. But it will give you grains of hardness. It will tell you how much chlorine is there. Here in Spokane, we have a lot of arsenic. It's in our water table because of silver mining in Idaho and eastern Washington, in the mountains around here. Silver mining was huge, especially in North Idaho. And so arsenic is a byproduct from the mining, and it got into our aquifer, and now we have very high levels of arsenic in our water. This is something that's really important to check. All of these things are so important to explore and to find out. And I, through the years, have really done a lot of research on water filters. And right now, the filtration unit that I think is the best is the wellness filter. And I don't know what all of you have, but I think that one is really important, is the wellness filter. And if you don't know someone who can help you with that, when I send out the link to the recording tonight, I will include the number of an Enagic distributor named Johnny Zoukopoulos, goes by Johnny Z. He lives on the East Coast, and he's an amazing filtration expert, and he would be happy to talk to you and help you get hooked up with the right kinds of filters for your area. He's really quite amazing. I met him when he very first signed up for Enagic. He lives in South Carolina, I think, and I was having a weekend training seminar in New York, in Westchester County, kind of just north of New York City. And he came all the way up there and spent the entire weekend learning about ionized water and health and how it affects your cells and all of that. And that's how I met Johnny. Now, in order to do this, in order to work together to impact the health of people all around the world, I need you to be bold. So not only do we want to talk about all the things that water does for us and all the things that ionized water is capable of doing, and in that, we encourage people to buy water ionizers. We encourage them to buy an SD501. We encourage them to buy something that's the highest quality for them. But I need you to be bold and go that next step and help them determine what kind of filtration they need in addition to their ionizer. Because without it, we do not get the water that we need to create the seeming miracles that can happen when your water is of the best quality. Because do you want to spend $4,000 or $5,000 on a water ionizer and still not have the best water available? This is kind of interesting. So when I bought my first Enagic unit, it was just what was it called? I can't think of it, but it only had 5 plates and a DX. And when I got that DX machine, that's all that was available from Enagic in those days. And when I hooked it up to my water system that was already a $10,000 water system. I had all kinds of, I had a big whole house carbon filter, and I had a UV light, and I had a water softener and something else. I can't think of what it was. But it was a huge system that I'd had in my clinic. And when I hooked it up, and then of course, back in the old days, I went to reverse osmosis because then I had, perfectly clean water, which was killing me, literally. But I hooked my machine up to everything sans the RO. And people would come and get water from me, and then they buy a machine. After they bought machines, and they would come to demos and bring people, and we would chat, and I'd do trainings, and they'd always say, well, my water just doesn't taste the same, and it's not as good as, and I'm not getting the same results I did when I got water from your house. What's the difference? And the difference, hadn't really occurred to me until we started talking, that the difference was the level of filtration that I had created at my, for my water that was being conditioned before it got to the machine, allowed my DX, which was only 5 plates, to work so much more effectively because it didn't have insulators in there. It didn't have any of the garbage in it. It wasn't being held back by lead. It wasn't being held back by arsenic. It wasn't being held back by chlorine, or it didn't, my filter didn't have to really do anything, the filter in my machine. So here's one of the really great things about that whole process is that you might spend some money on a filtration unit for your house or just for your kitchen, but you really don't have to replace the filter in your machine. As long as the water is going through your machine on a regular basis, nothing's growing in there. Only if you let that water, like if you went on a vacation for a couple of months, something would start growing in your carbon filter. But it would be really difficult because nothing has really been introduced to it because it's all been filtered out before it got to your machine. So you save your plates, you don't have to clean your machine very often. You save on filters because you don't have to replace your filters. And you end up with amazing, supercharged, super high quality water that really does impact your health, the health of your cells, and the health of everyone who drinks that water. So as we like to say, we can change the world one glass of water at a time. So let's talk about your elevator speech. So in the bonus week, kind of before, we talked about the fact that your ionized starts with ordinary tap water, and it does filter it. And this is where we want to add in here, when you start dealing with your own customers, you want to do a little test with them. There is something called a what's it called? Just a second, it almost came to me. Something. I'll send it to you in a link. I'll send you the link to the company. But they make a it's called a water safe drinking kit, and it's produced by Silver something Labs. I'll send you the link in the email, and you can buy those pretty inexpensively from the company. And so when you're testing water, when you're testing the tap water, you can also test their Ionagic water after you've got them, sort of comfortable, and you say, well, this is what I do to produce the best quality water. You can't make people buy filters, but you can sure encourage them to. And I highly recommend it. So it starts with ordinary tap water. It sends it through an electrical field where H2O is broken up and antioxidants are created. And at the same time, it creates slightly alkaline drinking water. And the main advantage to that is that that slightly alkaline water passes directly through the stomach and contributes to faster and more effective hydration. And then to remember that your DNA is not your destiny. And when you give your body the tools it needs to heal itself, it does exactly that. And then in week 1, we talked about the fact that all health challenges stem from the same core problems. The oxidation is the main culprit. And oxidation leads to dehydration, and oxidation through dehydration leads to inflammation. But again, your DNA is not your destiny. And when you give your body the tools it needs to heal itself, it does exactly that. Week 2, we talked about the fact that free radicals are just atoms or molecules that have lost an electron, and they are on a mission. They are dedicated to find one, and they do not hesitate to steal an electron from anywhere they can, and that fat is the easiest place for them to steal an electron. And all of our cells, and we have about 100 trillion of them, are bombarded by 10,000 free radicals every day. And those free radicals are responsible for aging as well as all known illnesses. And all a free radical needs is an antioxidant to stop it. And ionized water contains more universal antioxidants than any food or beverage, plus it's tasteless and it has 0 calories. And today you can add to your elevator speech, we are in the middle of a water crisis. More than 19 million illnesses annually can be linked to our drinking water. And the quality of the water you drink determines the quality of the cells in your body. Now we're going to open it up for some question and answer time. And like I said, I don't really have access to, so if you will all unmute yourselves and then ask your questions because I didn't see any, we don't have any questions up here. So did anybody have questions from last week or this week?
Yes, Dr. Parker, this is Abe.
Yes.
And you touched on the very thing I wanted to ask you about tonight, and that is that I noticed that there's a change in my drinking water when I use the machine.
Mm-hmm.
It tastes almost like God, how can I say, like baking soda or something? Kind of a fishy taste.
That your water's gotten too alkaline. So you're running your water too slowly, or you need to decrease the setting. What do you have it set on right now?
Well, I was doing the 9.5, and
Yeah.
I decreased the flow, and because I was trying to get more electrons in the water.
Yes.
So, but then I noticed the taste. I said, "Gosh, what is this?"
Well, so here's the good news. The good news is that your plates must not be coated with calcium because you're getting a good flow of electricity through your water, and it's splitting a lot of water molecules. So good news on that front.
Oh.
And so when you slowed the water flow down, it did give it more time to split more, but you got too many hydroxyl ions. So your water got a little too alkaline. And when it gets there, it starts tasting funky, tastes fishy.
Yeah. Oh, that's what it is.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So
you got two options. You can either put it down to 9.0 and run the water really slowly, like you were, or you can bump it back up to 9.5 and run it just a little bit faster. So here's one of the ways to know exactly how fast to run your water. So get two water glasses, and set your machine on clean water, just clean water. And adjust the flow until the water that's coming out of both hoses has the exact same pH level.
Oh. So you have to test pH?
Yeah, that will tell you that the speed at which you need to run your water.
Oh.
The other way to just eyeball it, and this is how I usually do it, is that when the water comes out of the hose, your drinking water comes out of the hose, it should look like it's braided and not like a stream.
Oh, okay.
It should have it. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say it looks like it's kind of braided instead of just like a cylinder?
Right. That's kind of like running pretty slow if it come out looking like that, right?
It's pretty slow. You don't ever want to run the water too fast unless you're cleaning the machine.
Well,
when it says clean.
I usually be looking at the bubbles in there, or the.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot more hydrogen bubbles in there when you run it really slow, but you're also going to have a lot more hydroxyl ions in there. So so you just have to get that happy spot where it tastes good, so that you want to drink it, because who wants to taste water that tastes like it has fish swimming in it?
Oh, so that kind of explains why I've been feeling kind of funky too, huh?
Yeah, because that upsets your digestion as well. When your water is too alkaline, it upsets everything.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the water then. That was the water quality. I thought it was something coming through there.
Where do you live, Abe?
California, over in Riverside. The water is hard here.
Yeah, you sure do have hard water in Riverside. My daughter used to live in LA, and I did a lot of talks in Riverside. So yeah, you really need to address your hard water issue. And in the meantime, you got to clean your machine really often. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else have a question? A comment? Oh, up here we've got some questions now. Can you use the water to clean contacts? You know, if you don't have a really high quality filter on your machine, I would never use it to clean contacts, because you need to make sure that what you're storing and cleaning your contacts in is clean. So I'm getting some feedback. So whoever has their speaker on, there we go. We were just hearing me on someone else's speaker. So I would not do contacts in this water unless your water is unless you've gone to the step of pre-filters and that kind of thing. And then Tina said, how fast do the negative ions revert back in the water in a sealed bottle? Is there a difference between glass and stainless? And finally, does light affect how fast the ions are reverting back, for example, in a clear bottle? Those are such great questions. Oh, I love those questions. So first, negative ions revert pretty quickly in a bottle that has any airspace in it. So within 20 minutes, you can check a bottle that has some air. So I'm going to tell you this. I used to do these demos at a massage massage therapy place. And I kept telling this distributor who was under me that she needed to use smaller bottles, and she just wasn't listening. So I decided at a demo to do this. So this is something for you to try. So she had a water bottle and she carried it around and she drank from it and carried it around some more and drank from it, carried around some more, drank from it, and then she'd refill it. And she had a machine right there in her office, so she could go get a fresh glass every time, but she was busy, so she wasn't doing that. She was putting it in a bottle. And it was a green bottle. It wasn't even clear. And so I challenged her to give me her bottle of water that she'd been drinking out of, and we put it in the glass, and we took the measurement. I used my probe to measure the to measure the negative charge, positive charge on it. So I got some brand new fresh water out of her machine from her office, and it had a high negative number of like 675, something like that for drinking water. And then I took her water and she had a positive number, not a negative number anymore. Because when you slosh that water around and when it's in a bottle that has air in it, even if it's a dark bottle, that motion causes everything to change. So light, heat, air, and motion will cause those ions to dissipate in a heartbeat. Exposure to air is the number one, and motion are the number one and number two. Light is down a bit. So back in the old days, I lived in a different house and I had a big counter, and I went on a trip to go do a bunch of demos, and I was doing a car trip. And so I put together some, various bottles of ionized water, and I left one behind on the countertop, and it was clear. It wasn't even dark glass. It was clear. And I left it there, and I was gone for 10 days. And in that 10-day time period, when I came back, it still had a very high negative reading. It hadn't moved. It did have some sun exposure. There was no airspace in it. And where I was typically getting a negative 800 reading, it was down to about 400, but that was sitting there for over 10 days. So light does affect it, but not as much as the other things. And there is a big difference between glass and stainless steel. Stainless steel is a metal, and it's an amalgam of metals. And so water is it's a solvent. It's a universal solvent. And it will, over time, break down the metal in the stainless steel just the same as it does plastic. All right, did I answer all of your questions? Because I can't see you anymore. My screen, I got so many people asking questions, I can't see you anymore. So I hope I did. If I didn't, speak up and you'll come back up on my log.
So
And,
Dr. Parker,
yes.
On the question that Tina had, is like, so my husband takes a gallon to work. Is it better for him to take like 4 smaller dark bottles then?
Yes, it is, please.
Okay.
So you put it in small bottles and you fill it all the way to the top so there's no airspace. There's really water spilling over when you screw the lid on. Mm-hmm. And you put it in water that, in the size of bottles that are small enough that when you open it, you're going to consume that water within about 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
After that, not many antioxidants left.
Okay. And sorry, back to the contacts question. That was mine.
Okay.
My friend asked me who just bought a machine. And she does not have pre-filters yet, but I do. So would you clean them with the 2.5 but not have them sit in the 2.5?
You do not want them to sit in the 2.5. That's way too harsh on them.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And honestly, even the 11.5 water depends on what kind of contacts you have. Are they gas permeable, hard, or soft?
They're not mine. They're my friends, so I'm not even sure.
So I wouldn't store soft lenses in anything except saline.
Okay.
Not even 11.5.
Okay.
Because saline is regular water with salt in it, and that creates a kind of a preservative.
Okay.
And 11.5 water has a higher water content and a lower salt content, and I just don't trust it to not create some problems with her vision overall. So,
but you could clean them with the 2.5?
You could clean them with the 2.5, but I would be careful about it.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just tell her no.
Okay, I think it's better. Now, I do recommend washing your eyes out, so that, with not 2.5 water, with 11.5 water. And that's really great. So, if she wants to get that solution off because she's concerned about the cleaning solution or the storage solution, rinsing them off in 11.5 water could work. I
think she just wants to know what she can do with it. I think that's what she was asking. Yeah. I have used the 2.5 on my eyes. If like some mornings, if I've had a lot of dairy the day before and my eyes are feeling kind of foggy, I'll do a little 2.5 and it just clears them up like that.
It will also create cataracts and macular degeneration because it's filled with oxidizers, and you do not want to oxidize your eyes. You want to antioxidize your eyes. So 11.5 water is the trick for that, not 2.5 water. Please. All right, who else has a question? You can speak up, you can type it in. Anybody have a question or a comment? Any problems that you're having getting on the recorded calls? Anything? Go ahead and ask away.
Yeah, Dr. Parker, this is Abe again. I just want to be really clear about the electrons in the water. I've been taking water to like my family, and I've been using these big bags, these water bags. So I think, I'm defeating my purpose here?
Well, the water's still going to be alkaline. Remember, that's part of your 3-minute elevator speech. The water's still going to be alkaline. So the advantage to slightly alkaline water is that it passes through the stomach faster, and it creates better, faster and more effective hydration. And when they first start drinking the water, they get some antioxidants. So, but after that, it's going to have dissipated. So much better. I mean, when I didn't, when I was doing tests on people and I'd be traveling all over the country, I couldn't bring a whole suitcase of, or 2 of glass bottles with me. So I would just go to the store and buy mason jars, small mouth mason jars, fill them up all the way, and then put a towel over them and have them stored away in their pantry or whatever. That works.
Oh, okay.
Because they're small, so you can get 12-ounce ones or 16-ounce ones. Just don't go, much higher than 16 because you want them to drink it all right away. And if
Okay.
they're not, just tell them to keep that, that part for cooking or washing something, washing, laundry or something.
Okay. All right. Wow, that's a
So,
lot of mason jars.
yeah, it is. But, that's the thing that you have people. So I'm going to tell it to you real straight here from my experience. You can have your time and energy and your kitchen turned into a water Grand Central station, and then they'll go forever and not buy a machine.
Right.
Or you can say, I'm willing to do this for a few weeks, and you can come and pick it up and come in, and you teach them how to do it. That's part of the whole thing, is that you get them to come to you. You help them learn how to fill up the bottles and jars and why it's important to do it in a certain way. Then you're already training them, and then they're going to get tired of coming to you to get water, and then they're going to buy a machine faster. It's trickier when it's your family, so you have to do more tricks like that. When they're your friends or your patients, I just made a punch card and said, I'm going to give you, this many trips worth of water. And then at the end of that, I'm going to need you to tell me that you're interested or not interested in buying a machine.
Wow.
Because if you leave it open-ended and you're the water delivery guy, the chances of them buying a machine get slimmer with every week that passes.
Okay.
Dr. Peggy, can you hear me?
I can.
Yes, I think you mentioned that if we do not have pre-filters, we do not get the best results.
Correct.
Oh, okay. So you're gonna give us the link?
Yes, when I send out the link to the recording tonight, I will give you the name and email of Johnny, who can help you with water filtration issues.
Because when I test my OPR water,
ORP.
yes, thank you, ORP, it usually goes up to 150.
That doesn't really have anything to do with the quality of your water. It can still have lead or arsenic or fluoride or whatever, or chlorine in it.
So how come the personal enrollment did not suggest it to buy a
Because they didn't know.
Okay.
Or they weren't being bold, and I'm asking you to be bold.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, unfortunately, it is time for me to see if there is one more quick question, and then we'll have to go because my next class is awaiting me.
Can I ask? Sorry.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So I do have the pre-filters. I have a 3-stage pre-filter and obviously the filter on my machine. So can I be pretty sure that there's no lead in my water?
I don't know which pre-filters you have, so I can't tell you that, but there's an easy way to check. And those pre-filters from that, I'm going to send you the link, the test. You can actually, so on the ones that you can buy, the little water safe drinking kits, it does have a lead component in it, but you can also send them a water sample and they'll test for 79 contaminants. And I think it's only, back in the days when I was doing that regular, it was only $25.
Oh, great. Because it's like $80. I think the kit that you get at Home Depot, you have to send it in, it's like $80 to do it. Like, oh.
Yeah, that's, So anyway, or it might be that the kits are only $20 and it was more for the, for the comprehensive one. I don't remember.
I got my pre-filters from Ion Faucets.
Ion Faucets has they generally know what they're doing. So you could just call Jessica or whoever and ask them about the filters and if it's taking out lead and arsenic.
Yeah. Well, I have the paperwork they sent me.
Yeah, but you can also let them do some work for you too.
Okay, good.
It's part of customer service.
Right.
All right, everyone. I really appreciate it. This is always like my whole day on Sundays and Mondays are pretty filled with getting all this together to make sure that I'm on track and don't forget too much and all of that. And so it's really the best part of my week. So I really appreciate the fact that you let me come into your lives and talk to you about the stuff that's so important to me. I feel really honored by that. And so until next week, I hope you have a great week, and be looking for hopefully sometimes these take a little while to download. And so sometimes I can't get them out till the morning. But if all goes well, cross our fingers, you'll be getting an email from me tonight that has all the links and all the info in it. All right. So good night, everyone. I will see you next week. And
Thank you.
if you're smart, I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.